Welcome to the lesson on mixed, fixed, and relative cell references. By the end of this lesson, you'll know the difference between mixed, fixed, and relative cell references and how to use those, especially when you're copy-pasting formulas and other information from cell to cell within Microsoft Excel. The purpose of these cell references vary. So first of all, we're going to talk about relative cell references. Now, Excel has a nice feature in that if you have some kind of cell reference in a formula or other information in a given cell, and you want to copy and paste that information into a separate cell, that reference will be relative, or that reference will change based on where you copy the information to. Let's look at an example. Here we have a spreadsheet showing the scores of 10 students in a given class. Now notice column D, we want to find the resulting percent correct based on the student's raw score in column C and also the points possible in cell G3. Well, as we know with percents means part over whole, and the part is our raw score. So ultimately in column D, we're going to want to divide the raw score by the points possible in cell G3. So the first step in that calculation is to populate column D with each student's raw score, which will then ultimately divide by the points possible. So for student 1, we're going to want the first thing, the raw score, to be populated in cell D3. So we'll put equals C3. Now notice it mimics the information then in cell C3. Well, what we mean by relative cell reference is if we copy this information, if we copy this equals C3 into the rest of the cells in column D, rather than it copying the original cell reference of C3, Excel actually accounts for the fact that we're moving it to a different cell and it changes that cell reference. Notice we copied it down 1, so it references cell C4. When we moved it down 2, it references cell C5, and so on. So the relative cell reference is helpful because it will change a formula based on the different information in the different areas of the chart or the data set that you're using. And again, this is a default setting in Microsoft Excel, so you don't have to do anything for it to change or be a relative cell reference. However, sometimes you want a fixed cell reference, meaning that you want a formula or other cell to reference the exact same cell as the location that you're copying from. So let's look at our same example here. Now, while we want each of these calculations to change or be relative to the different student, we want the total points possible to be the same reference in every case, because the points possible, or 50 points, is found in cell G3. So if we were to include that information, G3, our first raw score is correct at 50%, but if we were to copy and paste that, we just get a bunch of divide by zeros, because notice it is defaulted to the relative cell reference, and this cell is referring now to G4, which is empty. This cell is referring to G5, which is also empty, so it's dividing by 0. So in order to create that fixed cell reference, we want to add the dollar sign before the G, which is the column reference, and before the 3, which is the row reference. And now, since we've used the dollar sign to fix or anchor those references, we can copy and paste that information in. And now each of our cells is being divided by 50 because it's referring to that fixed cell reference of G3. Now the third category of mixed cell reference is just a combination of both of these. Sometimes you want the column to remain fixed, but the row to change based on where you're pasting the cells, or vice versa. You want the row to be relative and the column to remain fixed. If for whatever reason we wanted to take this formula and we still wanted it to reference column C, but we wanted the row reference to change, we would add the dollar sign before the C, and that's going to fix the column reference, but leave the row reference as a relative reference. So notice when we randomly copy this information, it's still referencing column C, but notice that it has gone relative to row 6. And we still have our fixed reference of column G3 because we've added the anchors there. So as you begin to use cell references in formulas and other places, remember that the default is relative, or it changes based on where you paste the information. You can fix it with the inclusion of dollar signs, or it can be mixed. You can put a dollar sign in front of the row which will anchor the row, but then the column will change, or vice versa.